Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Greetings, gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. I am your host, Scott McKay. You can find me on X, on True Social, on TikTok, and on YouTube at Scott McKay. Also on Instagram and Threads at Real Scott McKay. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com as always. And gentlemen, if you're not part of the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook, we're looking to meet you there and have conversations about being a better man and being better with women. Today, we're going to talk about something that needs to be talked about, but it isn't really easy to talk about. Yeah, we've done that on this show before. What am I kidding myself? We know how to do this in our sleep. But what we're going to talk about today is how to be assertive as a man without being angry. In other words, can you be direct? Can you get what you want without coming off like some sort of obnoxious douchebag bully? Well, according to my guest, my returning guest, I might add, who is Dr. Marsha Reynolds from Phoenix, Arizona, you most certainly can. As a matter of fact, you better be assertive or you're not going to get anything you want in this life. Welcome back, Dr. Marsha. It's good to have you.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you have a book called The Discomfort Zone, and you have another one called Coach the Person and Not the Problem. So really at your core competency, as they say, you're a coach's coach, aren't you?
I love working with coaches, and I have the great opportunity to work with them all over the world. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
How does that intersect with the topic of being assertive but not angry? Are there a lot of people who are coaching angrily and need help there, or is it a separate topic, really?
Well, you know, the relationship is that oftentimes being direct is just being very clear and concise with what is on your mind. But so many times we think, well, I can't really say that, or we're judging someone, but, you know, we're making faces, but we don't want to say directly what we're thinking. So, you know, not being clear and concise with what is on my mind with you so we can talk about it comes out sideways. And that's often what hurts the communication. And then we get really angry because we don't like what's going on, but we haven't really said anything about it.
Yeah, you just kind of come off as passive aggressive if you're trying to slide it sideways, right?
Totally. You know, I was at a memorial service this weekend with my ex. It was his friend, and we were trying to find a place to sit. And so I started to rearrange stuff on this table, and I thought about it, and then I moved it around, and I could hear him doing his.
Oh, but we as men are famous for that. I mean, that's in our DNA as male human beings.
Oh, my God. I said, you know what? If you're going to judge me, just say it out loud. It's so annoying just to make those noises. He says, well, you're moving things around. I said, yeah, I am moving things around. So why don't you say, why are you moving things around? You know, or maybe we can find something else.
I'm not sure that's gender specific, though.
Yeah.
My wife has the sigh.
Yeah.
When you're doing something that's not something she thinks is going to go right, or here we go again, it's a,
Yeah. It's that weird sigh.
Yes,
thing.
right.
And we know they hear us, so there's an intention to be heard, you know, but it's that whole judgy thing that we all get into, which we're natural judgers by nature. The brain has to judge everything to protect you. You know, you walk in a room and you look around where to sit, and the brain is saying, where's the safest place? You know, and so we judge by nature. So we have to be really good at the practice of catching judgment and breathing and letting it go so you can be present with the person. But that takes practice.
You know, it's funny because you said we're looking for the safest place to sit in the room. I think law enforcement officers and ex-military guys always like to face the door when they're in a restaurant or something. But I think many guys out there aren't looking for the safe place to sit. They're like, okay, where am I able to really, really get a good look at the action here without maybe getting hit by a bottle rocket? You know, I mean, what's the coolest place to sit, not the safest place to sit? Yet if you're with a woman and you want the woman to be attracted, you got to concern yourself with her safety, because that's what women think for sure.
Well, you're right. And it's not necessarily what is safe, but you're unconsciously like choosing what's the best place for me. So, I mean, there's just so much stuff that goes on in our brains without us even thinking about it.
Right, right. For the good of the cause here, there are certain concepts that I think we were very familiar with at a cursory level. We know about them. We've heard about them a million times. But when it comes to actually defining them, we're lost. And I think kind of like being quote unquote high maintenance, what does that mean? Or being emotionally available. Nobody male knows what the hell that means. Or, even taking oneself less seriously is something I have to define very clearly to a lot of men when it comes up. What is passive aggression? How do you define it? What is it actually?
Well, it's exactly what you just said. It's, that sigh, that, oh God, here we go again type of noise. I'm doing it in a way that I know that you hear me, but I'm not going to say anything about it. So I'm just letting you know that's not acceptable behavior, but I'm not going to say anything because we're not going to get in this argument. So it's either that or I'm really nice to you when I don't want to be. And so it's ingenuous behavior as well, instead of, again, just saying, here's what's on my mind, which I know it's difficult, but in order for any of us to connect, we have to get better at just saying, here's what's on my mind. What do you think?
Now, you and I were talking about a fascinating subtopic to this whole thread before we hit record on this podcast. Clearly, you already know that this audience is 100% male, save for a few flies on the wall, women who just like listening because they want to kind of figure out what I'm telling men about women and kind of keep me honest, and that's fair. But you were talking about how much more difficult it is for women to wrap their heads around the need to be assertive, because in our culture, women who are assertive get the Karen stigma. You're thought to be this raging bitch who's trying to get what she wants, and is just mean and angry and loses her cool and loses her temper about it. And so even if a woman stands up for herself, or if she is very clear and concise, as you like to say, we need to be about what she wants, she's branded as angry or somehow less feminine than other women or less desirable a partner. You see this in politics a lot. Anytime a female politician is assertive, she's judged differently than a male politician would be.
Yeah. Well, you see it in the workplace all the time as well. I worked in primarily for 11 years, I worked in tech. And so I was often the only woman in the room. And I definitely spoke up. I'm a very small woman. And so I had a big voice, but it really, in our brains, we still have this definition of what women should be, what men should be. And both of those, they're outdated, and we live by these past definitions that don't serve us today. So it's even the same thing for men, that men should be this way, and which kind of like keeps them in this container where they can't expand, like you said, be emotionally available, because they'll be weak. So, I mean, these things persist. You think by this time in history, these things would go away, but the thing is, I teach women's leadership all over the world. And I always say, speak up, say what's on your mind, ask for what you need. And yes, they will judge you, do it anyway. Because sooner or later, my experience in the workplace was they accept, well, there she is again. But maybe she's got something to say, because, I kept rising up in the ranks regardless of being that bitchy woman. So can you just stop for a moment and say, I'm judging this person. I don't like the way she's saying it, but what is she saying? Is there any value in what she's trying to share? And that's the way we can come together.
Well, I agree. I mean, men are men, women are women. We're allowed to be masculine, feminine creatures, respectively. And we are going to come off differently. I mean, women, for example, in a relationship can get away with more violent acts than any man can because, good grief, she's the woman and he's the man. That's where it ends. Kind of like if a hot 22-year-old teacher has sex with a 17-year-old student at high school.
No.
Everybody has a lot more sympathy for that than if it were the other way around, at least ostensibly. I don't know if the actual legal system does, but men in particular in the comments when that's the news story are like, man, where was she when I was a 17-year-old,
Yeah, well, that's interesting because there's been a number of movies that show that those women are also judged. They're taking advantage of a child. So, yeah, I'm not so sure that goes across the board.
I'm not sure it goes across the board either, but it's a bit of a double standard, at least for demonstrative purposes, if nothing else. I mean, the guy who's a teacher who preys upon a 17-year-old girl is a monster.
Yeah.
Automatically, yeah. Two things there. First of all, you mentioned how men have to be a certain way or they're not masculine. And you see that driven by TV and movies and media all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Great examples like Breaking Bad and Yellowstone, wildly popular television shows where the men have to be violent and have to know how to be dangerous or they're just not man enough. And you have normal everyday dudes watching this show going, yeah, I got to be more stoic. I got to stop having a sense of humor. I'm absolutely 100% correct to be allergic to fun. I have to have a scowl on my face all the time. And then you end up with these guys doing online dating pictures where, they're scowling at the camera, looking sideways, thinking that's going to be attractive to women. Meanwhile, they wonder why women are scared of them, especially if they're big, burly dudes. I mean, big, burly dudes have to soften the blow of their physical appearance. And
they need to look friendly.
Yes, exactly. The biggest, burliest dudes I know who are the most successful with women are teddy bears because they know nobody's going to fight them. In their mind, they need to realize they have to work extra hard to put people at ease rather than playing up to this pro wrestler image where I'm just going to intimidate and be violent at everybody. Those guys are in jail, aren't they?
Right. Well, it's interesting, like, though you mentioned Breaking Bad, and it was like everybody who was on there was violent except for Walter White.
Well, he got that way.
He got that way, but when you think about the influence of the drugs, but he was, if you were to look at his archetype and characterize him, that he was the smart guy that got caught up in this, and his care for his family, and even toward the end. So there are some characters to look at, but it gets like totally crowded out with all the the tough guys. And I'll tell you, even today, there's such in the past decade, push for the strong women on TV and in the movies. The lead players are often women these days, and they're tough, and they're all fighters and good fighters, so it's interesting that we have what we see in our society, at least, as our role models is toughness. So it's not assertiveness. It's not direct. It's not connecting. It's toughness.
Yeah, that's a little different. That's a mental frame of mind where you're just more resilient. You're talking about the women being tough on television nowadays too. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if it goes to a Beth Dutton extreme, where she's just ruthless and she's tougher than 99% of all the men watching, that just gets depressing for guys.
Well, it's depressing for women too.
It is. My wife and I didn't like that character.
No, not at all. Me neither. I quit watching because of her.
Yeah, we did temporarily. Then I had too many friends saying, stick with it, and turned out to be better. But we'll watch a character like that and think, I can't even keep up with the women nowadays. I might as well just stay in my basement eating Cheetos and single and live with my mommy and let her do the laundry and feed me dinner and just not even get a job. I might as well just stay buried in my cave. That's what a lot of guys are thinking, but that's just not the real world, is it?
No. And it does, Scott, come down to that, what it is I think I'm supposed to be, instead of really looking at what is it truly that they want me to be. What do women really want you to be, not what you think you should be? And they're not really looking at that. They're watching TV, they're watching the movies, and they're not just, really talking to women and saying, what's most important to you? And frankly, on a lot of dating sites, the women will say what's most important to them. The older I get, the more important it is that we can sit at the kitchen table and have a really good conversation. And if I can't have that with you, I don't care about all of the sex and the this and that, because that's really important, at this point in my life. So what is it truly that they're wanting from you that you could learn how to give? That's the question.
Well, it comes down to safety, doesn't it? I mean, there's no safer place than at the kitchen table having an honest, truthful conversation with someone. I think a lot of guys, Marsha, have this outward persona where I'm trying to be tough, I'm trying to be a badass. But then when it comes to actually talking to women or even saying out loud what they want sexually, once they're dating, they become passive-aggressive bowls of oatmeal. And that is really creepy to women, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but because I haven't really been taught how to
Bingo.
Yeah, right. So they don't know what to do, and Scott, a big part of this, and it's not men's fault. They've been brought up this way, that the world revolves around them. I'll take big dating breaks because I'm so sick of everything I say, they turn into a story about them. And then they tell their stories, and don't ask me anything about mine. I'm tired of hearing that.
That's not gender specific either, though.
Yeah. Well, but men are told, the world revolves around them. And it's true. You're absolutely true about that. But here we're talking to men, and to really look at. So I have a good friend. We've been friends for, 40 years. And we were out hiking, and my hiking boots were new and my feet were kind of hurting. And I was going to say something. And I said, no, I'm not going to say anything about my hiking boots, because he's going to turn around and tell me about his hiking boots. And I don't want to hear it. Okay. So we stopped and I said, you and I have been friends for a long time. I just want you to know that I just stopped myself from sharing something with you because I thought you were going to turn it on and tell me about your boots instead of saying, oh, so what's up with your boots? And he said, oh, okay. Yeah, I do that. All right. I'll think about it. Okay. So we go on our hike and it's not even 5 minutes later. I said, yeah, my boots are really hurting. And he says, oh, my boots are great. And I turned around and I looked at him. I said, 5 minutes is all it took for you to forget what I just said to you. And I know it's habitual that it's, people tend to okay, how does what this person say relate to me? What's my story about that? But that just breaks the connection. That breaks the conversation. It's so annoying to always have the person turning it around to them. And I even told this guy once, because he was always he had so many stories. And I finally said, you know what? You're entertaining, but you're not engaging. Well, Scott, I've never heard from him since then.
Yeah, I can raise my hand. I've been accused of that myself.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I know it's a hard habit to break, but can you work on it?
Well, I think the place it comes from is, I'm getting a little older. I have lots of experience. You just brought up something that's so absolutely intersects perfectly with me giving you this example or telling the story. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting. It is engaging. And the person falls for it. They fall into the trap. And then they wake up a few minutes later and go, hey, wait a minute. We didn't talk about what I wanted to talk about here.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened? I didn't even see this coming. And now we're done and having this conversation.
Yeah. And you never asked me a question.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's okay too, though, Scott, but preface it to say, oh, I hear what you're saying and it relates to something, an experience I had. Do you want to hear it? Just preface it.
Right.
Give me a chance.
Ask a question.
Yeah. Give me a chance to say, yeah, tell me about yours, or, no, I don't really want to hear about yours. I want to talk about mine. So, yeah.
Well, I would like to think I've improved somewhat since this was a bigger problem previously, but I'm just
sure
being vulnerable here, saying I have a tendency to want to do that. And so I understand exactly what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
Here's a curveball question.
Mm-hmm.
I think so far we've been kind of lumping men and women into this monolithic silo.
Mm-hmm.
A monolithic silo sounds pretty badass if you're a farmer, but I digress. What does life experience and perhaps even angles like birth order have to do with this.
No.
And I'll tell you what prompted me to ask that.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about going out on dates with people, men, who make it all about themselves, and how men have been socialized to make it all about themselves. I used to have a string of girlfriends who were all daddy's little girl and only child. And they weren't evil, horrible, mean people. They were sweet.
Mm-hmm.
But they really were high maintenance and selfish, and they were used to having things their way. And the world did kind of revolve around them. Not to the point of like Veruca Salt and Willy Wonka, like, I want an Oompa Loompa and I want it now. I mean, I wouldn't have tolerated that. They were very sweet and not even passive aggressive, but they were confident that the world revolved around them.
Yeah.
And in my younger years, I kind of liked women who were a little needy and liked me and say, but Scott, I want to do this, And I thought they were real cute.
Like my brother.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he's a youngest, or if he's probably not an only child, if he's your brother, obviously. But the youngest can have that mentality. Meanwhile, the oldest, stereotypically at least, are the type A's and the drivers. And if it's going to get done right, I got to do it myself. And the middle child feels forgotten. And this is how the world tends to revolve. How would this play into one's tendency to naturally be assertive, as opposed to passive aggressive or not at all?
Well, all of this, as you're pointing it out, is learned behavior. Even with birth order, it still revolves around how you're being treated. If you're in the middle, and especially if there's a lot of kids, you're not heard that much because you're in the middle. But even what you said, the first child aren't always type A. Many first childs are geeks. It's I must be responsible. And so a lot of them are even introverts. I must be responsible. I must get work done. I'm going to do things that I can excel at. So, we have to, in all of these things, as you said before, it's not just men, it's women too. We have to be careful about stereotyping because it shows up in different ways. So there's tendencies. I'm a middle child, but there was a child that died before me. And my mother was not emotionally available. And so it made me very strong and independent and wanting to take care of my younger brother. Okay, so my assertiveness came from my need to be the independent caretaker. So it really comes up with, what is the experience that you were brought up with? And yes, oftentimes girls, especially the youngest, are the babies, they're given everything and totally taken care of, and they then end up being needy because they didn't have to take care of themselves. But not all. And so, it is, though, what was it? What were the messages you got as a child? So I said, I stereotyped and said a lot of men are told the world revolves around you. But messages have changed over the years. Even for girls, there was a big shift in the 60s. Before that, girls were told, you can be a nurse or a teacher and you will get married and have a family, and that's the way life should go. And then all of a sudden in the 60s, they were starting to be told, oh, well, you can be anything you want. You should go out and be amazing, without telling them what amazing is. I call it the burden of greatness. And so you get a real split with women who are, it's a range, with still, women that are looking to be taken care of, all the way up to very strong, independent women that were told you can go out there and be anything. It's like, okay, I'm going to go out and take on these challenges, and I don't know what it is. I'll do this and then I'll do that. And that's where my book Wonder Woman came from, was I researched strong, smart women in the workplace and the challenges they face. And it was picked up by a publisher, and they asked me to write a book on it. So again, there's a whole range of behaviors, and we have to stop and take a look at what are my stereotypes? What am I expecting people to behave in what way? Can I let them behave in a different way? Can we not do that for each other? Whether we're dealing with, someone of the same sex or the opposite sex, to really, this is where coaching comes in, to stop and take a look at, how am I judging this situation? How am I what are my expectations that are not being met here that's making me angry or afraid? And, can I open up and try to be curious about what's really going on here? What does this person really need? What are they asking for? Can we come to that place someday as human beings? Would be just an awesome evolution, I think, for us, instead of falling back into these stereotypes that keep persisting.
It's really coming down to a central factor here, and it's the elephant in the room. Okay. If we make it all about ourselves, whether we've been socialized that way or we did it because we felt like it, we're missing out on listening and hearing other people. And nobody who feels like you're a bull in a china shop trying to get what you want because the world revolves around you is going to help you, aid, or abet you in any way, because it's going to be a power struggle.
Yeah.
It's not going to be teamwork. One of the most under-evolved states that a lot of men find themselves stuck in is something I've talked about on this show before, but it's this weird phenomenon, weird to me at least, where unless you are smart the way I'm smart, talented the way I'm talented, interested in what I'm interested in, you're an idiot.
Yes.
You have
oh my
no
God, it's
value.
gotten worse and worse, hasn't it?
It has. You have no worth. And even if the person, the man, is involved with something that 99.9% of the world thinks is a waste of time or indeed idiotic, they found their little echo chamber of people who are their yes men, and they have their little cadre together, and together the rest of the world is idiots. If you're a Major League Baseball player, you're an idiot because you're not playing my sport. If you're a Harvard professor of this, well, then you're not a real man because you can't deadlift 700 pounds. And it's really under-evolved is the only way I know how to put it. Yet you have a lot of people in whatever iteration. I've only given several examples, but there are limitless iterations of this, who go around thinking if this person isn't like me, then they are to be disrespected. And they owe me what I want because I'm better than them. And it's an arrogance. And then they're angry when they don't get it, which makes it even worse. And it's driven by the me first culture, regardless of birth order. I mean, that's something that's been going on since, well, you could say
in the
50s,
U.S.,
80s. Yeah, for sure. And it's also driven by social media. You find your little group of people and the rest of the world can go screw themselves. But that just doesn't fly in the real world, socializing with real people, because if everybody's trying to be, quote unquote, assertive to get what they want, I mean, even in relationships are purely transactional. We've gone to a point where the transaction is one-sided. Why won't these women spread their legs and have sex with me? Why won't this rich guy marry me? Well, you're not deserving what you want. You're not giving anything in return. What's in it for the other person? I mean, the holy grail of sales is the whiff 'em, right? I got to make this valuable to the person I'm trying to get to buy something from me. All of that seems like it's out the window nowadays with a whole lot of people, Marcia. Therefore, the need for a talk like this about how to be assertive without getting angry, because people just become petulant children when they don't get what they want.
Yeah. Well, the polarization has just gotten worse and worse and worse. If you don't think like me, you're an idiot is absolutely the truth. And then we go out and just seek people who think like me instead of trying to explore what else is possible. What's called confirmation bias. I seek to only confirm what I think is right. And that's what we do. And, when I had said that, I'm so grateful that I can get out in the world and work with other countries, because we're the worst when it comes to this. Our culture is that, independent, take care of myself, and it's up to you to do that too. And what's important to me is most important. And, where I work with a lot of countries that are much more communal, where it's like, no, we take care of each other. And, I'm not talking about their politics. I'm just talking about their culture, and it's just so delightful, to be in that space. So it does exist. It's learned behavior. It's not, human nature human nature actually is more, we're social animals.
Very
The
curious.
worst punishment is isolation, is to put you in isolation. So, we do want to connect. And so that's the saddest part, Scott, is that we separate, we divide, we don't connect with people, but in our hearts we want to. And we have a longing to do that, and which makes us sad, angry people, which is too bad. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as you're talking, I share your sentiment about how, well, to put it in my more blunt way, I think everybody in the United States should get a passport and go see the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're in our own little echo chamber as a country, frankly. But for real, if we decide we're going to cling to our comfort familiarity zone in terms of the people we know and the thoughts we think and the stuff we do, we're stuck with our own limitations.
Absolutely.
The joke's on us. We're not out there seeing the world. We're not out there expanding our horizons. We're not out there meeting new people. Who knows? We may actually find something we like just as much, if not better, than the gig we're sticking ourselves with. You talked about isolation being the worst form of punishment. Yeah, when you put someone in solitary confinement as a prisoner, it's extra punishment. Yet people were starting to see the COVID lockdowns, for example, as a luxury.
Yeah.
I just don't have to be bothered with
and
people
they're not
anymore.
coming out. And they're not coming out.
Some still aren't. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was like the greatest blessing to them ever. I don't have to actually deal with other people anymore. This is freaking great. So you don't have to be assertive at all anymore. You could just sit around and stay angry. There's no one to babysit it.
Yeah, but you know what, Scott? There's something you said earlier I want to really take a look at. What's underneath this is fear.
Oh, absolutely.
So
that is a
there's
major
difference.
soapbox on this whole show, by the way, every time.
There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. And people that are arrogant have to measure themselves against other people in order to feel good. So they're either people that are better than them. Look at, they're great. I'm going to be with them. And then there's people below them. So there's always a measurement of where I am. I can't just stand on my own. Where confident people are just confident in their own skin. So what we're seeing is really, it is underneath. I'm just so afraid of putting myself out there, of sharing what's really on my mind, because it could be judged. Absolutely, it could be judged. Oh, well, but it's like, so where are you going to work on this? Do you want to, is really the question.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the difference between arrogance and confidence. Confidence is a belief in one's own competence.
Mm-hmm.
You can be super confident and come off a little cocky about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that arrogance is really off-putting. It's, I'm better than you, and therefore you owe me. You owe me respect. You owe me deference. You owe me whatever I want. And your needs are unimportant because, well, I'm better than you.
And I have to be better than you. Otherwise, something's wrong with me.
Right. And those same people I alluded to earlier, who are in their own little echo chamber of whatever it is they're into and good at, no, they won't do anything that might expose them as being incompetent because it's not something they practiced or that they've done. It's just you're less than they are because you don't do what they do.
Yeah.
And one of the annoying features of that personality type, as you've alluded to, is they basically worship the gurus, the Hall of Famers, if you will, at whatever they do. If that person walks into the room, they're the biggest fanboy ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obnoxious. And it's the opposite of being assertive with purpose. Assertiveness with purpose to me is basically grounded in one thing. I've got a point. It may not be just for the good of my selfish cause. It may be for the good of my family or for the good of the whole crowd around me. No one's standing up and saying what needs to be said here. And the situation that comes up for me is I remember one time they were trying to get us on a plane that hadn't been cleared to take off yet mechanically. And I was the one who stood up and went, I don't want to get on that plane if it hasn't been fixed yet. And then all of a sudden, everybody else sitting in the waiting lobby for that flight was like, me too. And they're like, all right, we'll get another plane. I have a point in that context. It isn't really about me. It's because there's a perception of right and wrong in this situation, and justice needs to be served. That's the root of someone who's an activist for the right reasons, in my opinion, by the way. If someone's just going around like the aforementioned bull in a china shop trying to get their way, either because they like bullying other people or they like making other people suffer. That's very different than being assertive because something needs to happen and I'm the one to get it done. And I think you can confidently assert yourself without arrogantly doing so, because the arrogance, while it's not an anger reaction, tends to make other people angry at you for being assertive, which is an angle we should probably discuss.
You know, there's two things here that what you were saying, that need to say it in an arrogant way. I'm the one who knows. But again, when coming back to the fear, it's that vulnerability. And yet, what is it that most women really want from a guy is a guy that can be somewhat vulnerable, that can say, I don't know, or, I'm not real sure about this. It's like that's much more endearing than everything. Now, I know there's women out there that want guys that totally take care of them and need to know everything and do all that. But that's less and less and less these days. Most of the time it's like, no, I don't need you to know everything and do everything for me because I am capable, because we're raising girls to know that they're capable. So when is it that you can be vulnerable and just show you're a human being instead of having to be the one who knows everything and knows better than anyone else, which is annoying.
Well, a lot of women talk about wanting a guy who listens.
Yeah.
Guys
right.
understand that to be a man who obeys, but that's not what she's asking for.
No.
She wants to have you sit and hear her real hopes and dreams and fears and loves so that you can be her partner.
Yeah. One of my previous relationships, and but he had a really nice way of saying, okay, so you're telling me all this is going on at work. What is it you want here? Do you want some ideas or you just want me to listen? And I love that he asked me that, because usually it was just listen to me. I don't want your ideas. So,
yeah, I don't think it would occur to most men to even ask.
I know.
They're going to default to one or the other.
Ask that.
I agree.
Yeah.
So you can obviously, as a man or a woman, frankly, bring up a point that you think needs to be made without blowing up and losing your temper about it. We don't have to be a Karen even as a man. Obviously, you catch more flies with honey, but sometimes when the simple request, I'm not talking about a passive aggressive behavior here, but hey, I think it would be great if you kind of sped them up in the kitchen because we have somewhere we need to be and we kind of need to eat dinner and it's been 30 minutes since we ordered.
Yeah.
You start with that. And then when they just basically tell you to go to hell, you've got a quandary, don't you? You don't want to raise your voice and get angry. You just want to become a little bit more al dente at first, going, no, seriously, I wasn't kidding, and look them in the eye. And then if they're still not doing this, I guess there becomes a point where, what's the rate of return here? It diminishes a little bit the more angry I get because they're going to just flat out kick me out. So how do you know how to measure your approach to being assertive in any given situation, Marcia? I think that's what guys really want to know here.
Well, you're feeling an emotion, and I know it's difficult to name the emotion, but to say, I want you to understand that my impatience is because if we show up late, it's holding everyone up, and I really don't want to do that. Would it be possible for you just to go a little faster so we don't have to hold everyone up? So name it. It's like I am impatient or I am disappointed, and I'm going to tell you why. That's so much better than, holding in the emotion. And certainly if you say, could you speed it up a little bit, and then they ignore you and then you just shut up and make noises.
That's when your wife starts thinking you didn't man up.
Yeah, exactly. So cut it out, but state why, always the why. This is what's going on with me. This is why I'm impatient right now. This is why, it would be really more comfortable for me if we could just move this forward because I don't want to show up and everybody's sitting in the room waiting for us. State why. That's the best thing.
One thing I would add to this conversation is the concept of Hanlon's razor. Which is, you've heard of Occam's razor before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, the simplest solution is usually the best, right? Hanlon's razor is a little different. when someone seems to be aggressively keeping you from what you want,
Mm-hmm.
or someone is coming off to you as being an enemy to you,
Mm-hmm.
it's more likely to be because of incompetence than aggression.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
Hanlon's razor, and I adore Hanlon's razor. And I think it's very useful in this situation. In the times that have occurred in the past where I was al dente up front, being kind of subtly assertive, for lack of a better way to put it, and it didn't
Mm-hmm.
work, I gave a more firmer request, was still with a smile on my face, right? And then when that was not heard,
Mm-hmm.
if you take Hanlon's razor into account, you realize the likelihood is this person isn't trying to jam me, especially if they're like a restaurant or a service
Mm-hmm.
company and they're trying to make money off you. They just
Mhm.
don't know what the hell they're doing. It's just overwhelm. Like if you're at a restaurant and they get a rush like at 8:30 and nobody expected it, and they only have 3 or 4 waiters left and 2 or 3 cooks, it's
Mhm.
not an aggressive act against me that my dinner's taking so long. Or
Yeah.
that my steak wasn't cooked right.
Right. It's that assumption. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You're not reading the room, which is another skill that is paramount for any evolved man, is reading
Mhm.
the room. The arrogant person who we've talked about is going to take this personally. Like, how dare you do this, right? Don't you know who
Mhm.
the hell I am? Like when a
Yeah.
police officer pulls them over, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But instead, what you can do is you can bargain with them. You can help them out a little bit. When someone's overwhelmed and they're trying to please you, but you're getting angrier and angrier, the antidote to me to just having it all descend into a vortex of doom where everybody's just angry and pissed off at each other. And by the way, everybody becomes less efficient when they're all angry
Mhm.
and energized, right? Not more so. You're less likely to get what you want when you piss everybody off.
Mhm.
Is say, hey, let me help you out here. Obviously, you're not able to get this done quickly. How about if we skip the soup, maybe, or the salad, and we just go right to the main course? Would that help you help me? Or, you know, maybe we just have a double dose of appetizers. We'll have filled our stomachs and we can leave. Help me help you, Jerry Maguire,
Mhm.
right? I think that bargaining is something
Yeah.
few people even think to do in a situation where they're feeling like they need to be assertive. And also, if someone's done something to us that we don't like them and we're pissed off at them,
Mhm.
it becomes a competition for men in particular.
Mhm.
I got to beat this bastard down, even if it's by getting the results I want, if not with my fists. But we still have to think win-win, you know?
Well, Scott, and this is the thing I want to leave everyone with. The moment that your emotions start to take over, then you lose
Yep.
good sense.
You lose.
Right. And so it's really a matter of emotional intelligence and of regulating, noticing tension in your body anytime. When you start to tense up, breathe into it before you open your mouth. Release the tension. It'll be better. So that's my last tip.
Quick question.
Mhm.
Do you know anybody in your life who by nature is a total asshole, but bless their heart, as we say in Texas, they spend their entire life trying not to be, but you know it's just under the surface and they're trying to bury it and keep it down with everything they've got. Do you know anybody like that?
I think there's a lot of people like
Oh,
that.
I think I know several people like that. Like
Yeah.
deep down, they really just want to be awful, but
Yeah.
they know it's not serving them well in life and they're trying. You know, it's like
Yeah.
fish are friends, not food, you know, like the
Yeah,
sharks
No, I had
in Nemo.
an ex call me last year, and his current wife had left him, and we'd been divorced for like 30 years, and he's like, "Okay, I'm ready. Tell me why I'm such a jerk." And I'm like, "Really? Do you really want to know, or
You got
are
a few
you just-"
hours?
Yeah. Exactly. And do I think it would make any difference? I told him, but I don't think it'll make a difference. He'll be that way forever.
Well,
So
hey, the first step
bless
is
his heart.
the first step is acknowledgement, right? Kind of like being an alcoholic. Her name is Dr. Marsha Reynolds. She is a transformational conversation teacher and a coach of coaches, which is kind of like being the Lord high everything else in this life.
Mhm.
She is a polymath for sure. And her books include The Discomfort Zone and Coach the Person, Not the Problem, both of which I'll put at the top of my Amazon storefront at mountaintopodcast.com/Amazon. I also want to send you to Marsha's website, which you can get to this time by going to mountaintopodcast.com/assertive. Let's make it that, okay? Dr. Marsha Reynolds, what are they going to find when they get to your website?
A lot of stuff about transformational conversations. And there's a link to resources, and there's tons of tools, that they can download and help them in their communication, and tips they can use. So lots and lots of good stuff on the website.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'll tell you what, Marsha, it's always fun to have you on this show because you're very smart and you say what you mean. And, well, it just ends up being great content. So thank you once again for being back on the show. It was great.
Thank you.
And gentlemen, if you go to mountaintopodcast.com, there's a way for you to get on my calendar so we can talk for 25 minutes or a half an hour about what's on your mind. If that's all we talk about, that's fine. If we can put together a coaching program that helps you get from point A to point B in terms of being a better man and getting better with the women in your life, I'll tell you what, gentlemen, as we've noted on this show previously, this century is a quarter of the way done. It is 2025. It's time to get the woman in your life you want in your life, and it's time to get the right relationship with the right woman. Even if you have issues in your relationship right now, even if you're perhaps on the precipice of divorce, I'm here for you. Get on the phone with me for free by going to mountaintopodcast.com and signing up for that first 25 or 30 minutes. While you're there, please visit our sponsors, which include Jocko Willink's company Origin in Maine, the Keyport and Hero Soap. And when you partake of anything from our three longtime sponsors, please use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 at checkout. All of that and more is there for you at mountaintopodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.